Hi, and welcome everyone to an interview with Vailes Shepperd. She is the author of A Good Ending for Bad Memories. And I'm Emily Barros with Bold Story Press. And we're going to talk today about Vailes' newly published book that we're very excited about. You can see the cover on the poster behind her. So Vailes, welcome.
Thank
and
you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me
Glad
about
to be here.
Tell me about writing this book. When you started, what the process was like, what inspired you to write the book, and even how you came up with this storyline. If you'll share that with all of us.
Sure, at least I'll try my best. And it's funny actually, because being asked about inspiration it's a very good question. But one of the reasons that I like the question is because I can answer it in so many different ways. And especially if a book takes a year or two to write, because at different times you're inspired by different things. I think that everything that I write is probably a family saga, simply because I find that territory just so vibrant, and there's so much that happens and many things in families. So I'm always inspired by families. I think that this book came about in a couple of different ways. I grew up I grew up near cousins who had a family of spinsters, two women that lived next to them. I was told, by my cousins that those women's father was the first attaché. So that part of my story is true. And I'm not saying that the country is true, but they were the first. He was the first attaché, and he took his family, and his daughters came back, and they never left the family house again. And I don't know their story, but something about seeing them inspired me to create their story. And so I did that. And so that's that part of it. Egypt is a country that I've visited and I love, and I can't tell you that I've spent a lot of time there, but something about it stays with you. So that was a part of the story. And then the other real part of the story is because the mother, one of the main characters, suffers from multiple personality disorder, and it came about because of a cruelty that she witnessed. And then a sense she inherited the disease because of her great-great-grandmother. And I know you don't really say that about mental illness, but it does travel through families in a certain way. There are things that travel through families that I think that we're unaware of. So that was a part of it. And just to talk about how, you could see something and experience it from multiple perspectives. And that happens to two characters in the story. So all of that was a part of creating it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read just a paragraph description of the book for those who are interested in buying the book and reading it. A Good Ending for Bad Memories is a multi-generational tale that follows the matriarchal lineage of a splintered woman with an uncooperative memory. Equal parts sprawling travelogue and family saga, A Good Ending is imbued with magical realism and Southern Gothic Americana. It is a fascinating study of the fragmented psyche of its central character and her quest to become whole.
Wow.
So Vailes, tell me, how long did it take you to write this book? When did you begin the process? And
it's hard. I don't have a line. I can't say, oh, I began this book in 2019 and it took until 2021 to write it, because I think I started, and years ago, at least, I had the idea, and I think I wrote it in part. So it seems like it took longer. If I were to say from beginning to end and chronologically, maybe 2 years. And that includes the time that it took with the editor as well. But I think it's substantially longer than that when you talk about the actual birth of the characters. And, it reminds me of something Edward Jones said, and it was in an interview that I did with him a long time ago, and he's the author of The Known World. He said he thought about the book for, 10 years or even more, 20 years, and then he sat down and wrote it within a month. And I'm like, wow. So the writing doesn't just take place at your desk. You do it everywhere. And like the characters in this book, I'm a walker. And whenever I'm walking alone, my characters are developing and changing and churning, and that's a lovely experience.
Wow. So you mentioned interviewing an author. I wanted to tell folks that Vailes is one of the founding members of the Washington Independent Review of Books, and she's a former senior features editor. So you are a writer and an editor. Did that make the process easier or more challenging?
I think it might, in some ways, it could be both, because I know how I edit, so my expectations may be, like most people, that you would do it like me. And then when you find out that that's not the case, it's an adjustment. In this case, working with Bold Story Press and with the editor, Salima Perkins, it was a wonderful experience on both counts. And I think that, you know, the way she read the book and said things to me about it, or where the reader might be unclear, or just everything she brought up, I felt like was right there, just below the surface, and it brought it out in me. And so that in itself was a wonderful experience. It's not always like that, you know, and I've edited a few books where I've had discussions with the writer who hasn't always liked it, but likes something about what I'm saying. And so we kind of compromise, and it's a very interesting relationship, can be.
So one of the interesting things about working with women writers only, women authors, is that perfectionism is an issue that is gender leaning. They say that men don't suffer from perfectionism as a general rule, and that it's an issue that women deal with more frequently. And I see it sometimes with women writers, in that they have a hard time giving the manuscript up to someone else, to say, it's finished, I've done all that I can do, I'm turning it over now to an editor or a publisher. Did you experience that at all, or did you know when you were done?
You know, I hate to say it, but you can always tinker. So if you gave it back to me today, I could definitely, like, oh, I'm going to say this like this. Definitely, you can always do that. But no, I didn't experience that. I was ready. And I think what happens to me is another kind of experience. And I remember being told by one of my teachers in high school English, I think, it's, if you're really sick of it, it's done. You know what I mean? If you just, you know, it's driving you crazy and stuff, then you won't.
Did you reach that point?
You know, I less with this book than something I'm writing now. I'm reading it again, and I do actually try to, you know, I don't think this ever really works, but you do try to take a break from your manuscript, and so that you can look at it with fresh eyes. And that would be lovely if it were entirely true. It is somewhat, but I don't think I've ever gotten my eyes to be as fresh as I'd like them to be. It is not a new manuscript, and it comes back in the same way that it was delivered. So this one, no, I didn't get sick of. What I'm writing now, I think I'm pretty sick of it. I think it's done.
Tell us about what you're writing now.
You know, I hate to say it, because I feel like I always have issues in describing the things I'm writing, because they sound so complex, when in fact, in the long run, I hope they're far more simple than that. At any rate, it's a story about a family who, you know, picks up stakes. They move from the big city. They're very wealthy, and it's two families that come together, and they move to their land in a tiny town, a fictional town in North Carolina, where they try to become modern day homesteaders. And what they realize is that Eden does, and they're kind of like Robinson Crusoe's. I was thinking about this. They go to this new place, and they're trying to grow their own food and feed themselves. And life doesn't exactly turn out the way it's supposed to be. And at the same time that we're chronicling their life in the town, I'm also chronicling the story of one of like the last physicians in New York City. And he's seeing these patients that have like the oddest ailments that he's ever seen. So I'm giving you both stories.
Okay. And when will that publish, or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. But you're nearing the end. You're getting sick of it, you said.
Yeah, I'm definitely finished from beginning to end. I'm in that stage where I'm making sure everything that's supposed to be in that book is there. I'm trying to.
So what advice do you have for other writers out there who are working on fiction and have been for years, who want to see their book finished and published? Do you have any words of advice?
Now, if you said they've been working on it for years, then they need to go ahead and try to give it to you, especially if they're a woman. They need to give it to someone else, because you can drive yourself insane by holding on to something for so long. I think that the one thing about writing that was, you know, drummed into me, and I think it's true, is that it is a craft. And so it's something like anything else, you have to practice. And that means you have to do it. And the truth of the matter is, for me, that's also the joy. That's the beauty of it. When you're there in front of you, however you do it, if you write with it, like I remember back in the days, it was a number 2 pencil and a spiral notebook, you know, or a computer. The beauty is those words on a page and that experience that you have there. And you do get to a point, I think, where you're, all right, it's time to share. And I think that could be why you do it, partially, but I think that other experience is something that you must do. So I would say write and read widely, broadly. I mean, I'm one of those people that would read anything.
What are you reading now?
I'm actually reading, I'm going back. I'm finishing the Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah. I can't see the book, Harris. I'm not sure of the last name. And I'm also reading Marilyn Robinson's, or at least this is on my desk, is Gilead. And I'm not sure I'm gonna read that trilogy or her series of books in order, but I'm gonna read them. I like to, I'm a book lover and have been from the very beginning. So I have a reading chair, and it's surrounded by my bookshelf and a bunch of books that are next and coming. And I have a very good friend that lives overseas. And so I get a lot of recommendations that are things that are secondary to the American market. And that's great too.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So any last either words of wisdom you want to share with folks, or any other parts of the story that you want to share before we finish here?
You know, I think that at this point, what I'd love to hear is how, you know, I'd love to hear from readers. How do you feel about the book? I want to know if it's done what I wanted it to do. My advice to anyone, you know, I think this is a wonderful place to be able to read and write and share and things like that. So I think it's a wonderful part of our world. And not every part of it, as we know, is so smooth and wonderful. In fact, you know, I think I'm going to write something about a story I read recently. Well, it's a much longer story, but it's about a woman whose son read something that gave him nightmares, that she wanted to take off the market. You know, she wanted the book removed from the curriculum rather than sharing, like trying to understand and explain to her son, you know, the cause of it. I think, so I don't really have any words of wisdom, except that I think that we ought to think broadly and think not just about ourselves, but about this is a shared occupation, shared planet, so to speak.
Well, Vailes, I'm so glad that you wrote this book and that you've shared it with the world. And I wish you great success with it. And we look forward to your next one.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.